Please welcome to the stage Suzanne Wilson Heckenberg, President, Intelligence and National Security Alliance, and Louis Shepard, Chair, AFCEA Intelligence Committee.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to see so many friends and colleagues here today. Please take a moment and stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America. Everyone?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Before we get started, I wanted to take a moment to recognize two extraordinary members of our community who we have recently lost. Many of you all call them both dear friends. Alden Al Munson was a respected leader whose career expanded government, industry, and academia, and he was a SIGINT pioneer. He played a pivotal role in advancing acquisition and innovation across the intelligence community. We also remember Kathy Johnston, a former DIA leader and vice president at Peraton. Kathy was not only a trailblazer in her own right, but also a generous mentor and trusted friend to so many in this room. Both Al and Kathy gave so much of themselves to this mission and our mutual organizations. On behalf of INSA and AFCEA, we extend our deepest condolences to their family, friends, and colleagues, and we honor their lasting contributions to our national security. Their legacies remind us why this community matters and why coming together at gatherings like this summit is so meaningful. With that spirit in mind, it is my privilege to welcome you all to the 12th Intelligence and National Security Summit. This year, we not only exceeded 2,000 registered attendees, but our exhibit floor sold out. From the beginning in 2014, AFCEA and INSA have shared a core belief: when government, industry, and academia come together, we strengthen our nation. Thank you for being here with us today and for being a part of this community. And Louis, thank you for the partnership.
Well, thank you, Suzanne. Thank you very much. Every year, our joint summit, AFCEA and INSA, stands out because of the people in this room. And we will begin, in fact, this morning, for your pleasure, with not one but two keynote sessions. Speakers here on the stage. This year we're doing things a little differently because these topics are complex. We want to cover as much as we can. I will be bringing up on stage General Keith Phillips, who has just returned from Ukraine as defense attaché in Ukraine, going to give us a current report on the situation in Ukraine and other topics. And then that'll be preceded actually by Rob Joyce, career NSA leader and IC White House national security leadership. Of course, we couldn't do any of this without the support of our sponsors. AFCEA and INSA would like to thank our premium sponsors, Amentum and Nightwing. I think we're going to throw up on the screen sponsor logos. Our keynote lunch sponsor, L3 Harris, a special thank you to them. Our pavilion sponsor, Karasoft Technology Corporation. Our reception sponsor for this afternoon's reception after we finish, Moody's. Platinum sponsors, Atlas Data Storage, Sinus, Elastic, Extreme Networks, GDIT, Google, IBM, Rakia, Realm One, Run Zero, SAP National Security Services, and Sayari. And a special thank you to all of our additional, look at that screen, all of our additional sponsor partners whose logos you see displayed. Their support reflects a deep commitment to advancing public-private partnership, never more important than today, for success in intelligence and national security.
We want this program to be as interactive as possible in typical AFCEA INSA fashion. For sessions here in the ballroom, please email your questions to questions@intelsummit.org. And also, please keep them as concise as possible. Thanks so much.
I One of the best parts of the summit is engaging not just with your colleagues who are fellow attendees, not just with our sponsors, but with the exhibitors up and down the halls there. If you visit them, you'll see technological solutions that can transform national security. Many of them, in fact, very exciting, are small and medium-sized businesses where bold ideas and real breakthroughs often begin. So please spend time with our exhibitors. And don't forget, we will close today with a networking reception right out there, just outside the ballroom. That's another chance to connect with your colleagues and continue these conversations in a more relaxed environment. Not to say a lubricated environment, a more relaxed environment. Let's get started.
In a world where threats evolve at lightning speed, staying ahead requires unmatched innovation and unwavering commitment. At L3 Harris, our intelligence and cyber sector is the trusted disruptor for the intelligence community. We empower the U.S. and allies with cutting-edge intelligence collection, data fusion, and communication capabilities for a multi-domain advantage. We provide advanced geolocation, sensing, and cyber capabilities to protect the homeland. Our next-generation EW systems enable force protection, a no-fail mission. We have a long legacy of building advanced microelectronics, cutting-edge sensors, and unique leave-behind systems that enable intelligence missions and provide our nation an asymmetric advantage. L3 Harris provides critical cyber capabilities to stay ahead of evolving cyber threats. Today, we are using AI and autonomous systems to provide resilient, secure, and interoperable intelligence and communications networking. We ensure real-time communication between operators and decision-makers is never interrupted. Our mission is clear: to enhance national security and empower the people who put their lives on the line every day to protect us. L3 Harris, trusted to lead, trusted to protect the future.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kristen Ream, Director of Strategy, Tactical Mission, L3 Harris Technologies, to introduce our opening plenary session.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I am so excited to be here with you today. The Intelligence and National Security Summit is the premier forum that brings together leaders from across government, military, industry, and academia. This is an important opportunity to share insights, confront shared challenges, and reflect on the role that each of us plays in building a stronger, more resilient future. L3 Harris has long been a proud supporter of AFCEA and INSA, as well as a trusted government partner. And I'm here today to declassify something pretty cool. L3 Harris's Intelligence and Cyber Division has been one of the best kept secrets of the intelligence community, as I'm sure you just saw in our video. We offer intelligence systems, situational awareness, advanced wireless, information resilience, robotics, microelectronics, and specialized communications for our classified customers, all with one goal, again, creating a secure, safe future. And that's why programs like this matter to us. They give us a chance to learn from one another, discuss mission priorities, and tackle difficult topics and challenges together. We all need trusted partners, and I look forward to connecting with so many old friends here and meeting as many of you as I can today and tomorrow. Our first guest speaker, Rob Joyce, is the principal at Joyce Cyber LLC. Previously, he spent more than 3 decades at NSA, where he led some of its most critical missions, directing the Cybersecurity Directorate, heading tailored access operations, and serving on the White House National Security Council. Following Rob will be Major General Keith Phillips, U.S. Army, who most recently served as the Senior Defense Official and Defense Attaché in Ukraine. Guiding these conversations is Louis Shepard, a senior technology executive and trusted voice on innovation. From his work at DIA, pioneering analytic platforms, to driving advanced R&D in industry, Louis has been at the forefront of connecting government and commercial technology to tackle emerging challenges. Together, they'll dive into how our community can stay ahead in a fast-moving threat environment. Please welcome Rob Joyce and Louis Shepard.
Thanks. Yep. Wait for Louis. Here we go. Thanks.
Thanks, Kristen. Have a seat, Rob.
Thanks.
Oh, it's a delight to have you here. Thank you so much for making the time. We have had a lot of excitement this year because we decided to have a technological focus this year. We've done thematic presentations and summits over the last decade, and technology is, of course, evergreen as a topic. We always have breakout sessions. We still do this year. But as right from the very get-go, we want to talk deep technology. And there's no better place in the intelligence community and national security community writ large than NSA. And as the acknowledged thought leader of that full community for many decades, it's our pleasure to have you here. So thanks for making the time. This is, as you know, as you and I have discussed, this is a pregnant time for new thinking on cyber. And one of the first questions I would love to tee you up with for the audience is the distinction between offensive and defensive cyber. There have been, for too long, there have been discussions in back rooms and behind skiff doors about offense in cyber. Here we are in front of the world. What can you tell us about the balance of discussions and utility on offensive cyber versus defense?
Oh, thanks, Louis. And I think the piece you need to understand is they're two sides of the same coin, right? Without understanding defense, you don't do good offense. And without doing offense, you miss some of the subtleties that would inform defense. And I think that was one of the strengths I had growing up at NSA, being on both the offense side and the defense side. And I like to say it takes a thief to catch a thief, right? You need to think in those terms of having gone after networks, having gone after that exquisite intel, and understanding how you win. And the way we win often in the intel or offensive cyber is just knowing more about the network than the people who defend, the people who designed, and the people who installed that network. And it's in those details that you find the opportunities. And so, when you have that as the roadmap for offensive success, it also teaches you on defense, you've got to sweat the details. And at NSA, we would have people who knew more about that network than the people who were operating and managing it, right? Because we put in the time. And so for all of you who run networks or have companies that have important information, you've got to put in the time to know your network because the attackers will put that time in.
If everyone who follows cyber, and even sort of the Time magazine level, I don't want to say that captures a lot of policymakers in and around the Beltway, but they certainly have seen reference to some high-profile hacks recently. To you, what are the most interesting and worthy of attention attacks that we've seen recently?
Yeah, the ones that concern me so deeply are these Chinese critical infrastructure attacks. So you'll hear the terms Volt Typhoon, Salt Typhoon. Volt Typhoon, a couple years ago, the community came out and declassified intelligence, right? Took insights into the Chinese programs that were pre-positioning on US infrastructure. And you saw Director NSA, FBI, CISA, and the National Cyber Director up on the Hill in open testimony talking about the Chinese intent to pre-position in our critical infrastructure, places like electricity, water, ports, rail, aviation, and to be able to disrupt those services at the time and place of their choosing with the intent of causing societal panic, right? And that's a fancy way to say they were pre-positioning for terrorism. They wanted us at a time of escalating tensions in the East to look inward and not care about what was going on the other side of the world in that political sphere because they wanted us worried about our families and our cities and the things that were happening here. And that, to me, that's crossing a Rubicon, right? To have broad-scale pain inflicted on the citizens and to be running operations so that you can execute those plans. And there's people in commercial industry who could see those intrusions, but it was the marrying of the commercial insights into the intrusions with the intent and purpose that came out of that declassified intel that really solidified, the angst and helped bring that out from behind those skiff doors you were talking about and say, this is a problem. Fast forward a year after that, we had Salt Typhoon, where an intel gathering activity into our telcos, and tremendous success on the part of the Chinese to get into some of our highest tech companies for the purposes of doing intelligence and reconnaissance. And you combine those things together, and they've had some very big operational success, and we've got to make sure that, one, we're doing the defensive things so they can't get to that level again, but two, that we do the things needed to deter them.
I want to remind people, if you do have a question, you can submit a question. You've been given information about how to do that, but so let's drill down on that. So there is more talk now in the public domain, on the Hill, from the administration about offensive cyber.
Yep.
Let's talk more about the talk.
Yeah, so it's very clear in the signaling from the administration that offensive cyber is a high priority and something that they want to enable and have as a tool in the toolbox. You've got to consider that in the totality of the space, though. What I've come to understand is cyber doesn't deter cyber. Right? And I'll just give you the Volt and Salt Typhoon as examples. When the Chinese had these successes into our networks, we didn't run off to the corner and rock back and forth and say, oh my God, we've got to give up our cyber programs. They've won, right? What resulted were these congressional administrative calls saying more cyber. And so my answer is yes and. Right? You need a credible offensive cyber capability. You need a strong intelligence capability. But you also have to use the big elements of national power. Right? In the end, you've got to convince these nations, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, all the typical adversaries, that cyber as an asymmetric weapon against the U.S. is more of a liability than a benefit. And part of that can be the imposition of costs back with cyber. But we have so many other things of nation statecraft that are typical deterrents and levers we know how to use. Everything from sanctions to tariffs to diplomatic leverage. Heck, when we have an intelligence intrusion and we catch a spy in downtown DC or at a plant that is in a DIB company, what happens? We expel diplomats, right? That is a signal from our government to their government that they've overstepped. I haven't seen the expulsions for cyber, so we're not telling other nations that, pre-positioning in our critical infrastructure is beyond the pale. And so you've got to have the senior most levels pounding the table and saying, this has got to stop, and then bringing things through Treasury, through Commerce, through State Department, through the Department of Defense and CIA and all of those things as a common united message that we're not going to tolerate this. That's what you're going to have to do to deter cyber.
Do you believe that we have a good enough understanding of the internal decision-making inside China, Chinese leadership, to assess and anticipate correctly what will be seen as capable deterrent on their side?
I think we do, but it really, like I said, it takes us at the senior most levels to care about it, message it, and make that the priority. And right now, it is not above that threshold line.
I anticipate that'll be pondered and thought about a lot, especially on the Hill this year, and that's a good thing. So let's switch gears a little bit, because every one of us are citizens, and both government and private citizens in the room. We all have our own online lives, which can be an attack vector through social engineering. How do you see the field of social engineering advancing today? What's the state?
Yeah, well, we've all been subject to those really bad Nigerian prince emails, right, with bad grammar and spelling mistakes, and contextually they just don't make sense to a rational person. Well, those are a thing of the past. The modern AI and LLMs now take a non-native English speaker and give them the ability to present as a credible, in-context threat. And what do I mean by that? I got to see an email recently that wanted to grift money out of a company, and instead of being the Nigerian prince story, it was a whole series of emails that were appeared to be forwards of forwards in an email chain like we all get in our daily work lives. And the oldest email went down to a company winning a contract. And then above that was the delivery of the contract and acceptance and people happy with it, and how do I get paid, and referring inside the company to the process that would get them paid, and then some exception where it didn't work, and then somebody saying I'll help, and then forward it into accounts receivable saying, hey, you got to take care of this, right? Fully credible all the way up the stack with the right names, phone numbers, and it wasn't an email, it was a chain in context, and the whole thing was fictitious. It was all generated by LLM. Right? That's what we're up against. It's much more believable and contextually relevant. Fast forward that, and now you've got deepfakes as well. And out there, when I do talks at times, I will play a deepfake of my voice that was created online from 2 minutes of audio, and my wife can't tell the difference between that deepfake and myself. It is that credible. It is that available, and that's what we're up against. Last year, at the end of 24, a company in Hong Kong had one of those phishing emails came in. The person who received it didn't think it smelled quite right, but it invited them to a Zoom call. And they went on the Zoom call. They said, what can that hurt? And on the Zoom call, they saw their CFO and one other member of their company, interacted with them in real time. The person talked to them and directed them to pay a $25 million invoice. And that whole thing was a real-time live deepfake with 2 live persons overlaid with the image of the CFO and someone else, right? They've gotten that credible. So we're going to have to continue to up our game. And just as we've talked about multi-factor authentication in our log-on virtual lives, we're going to have to start to have some sort of out-of-band authentication and real-time checks on the validity of real-time communications, because it's getting that good.
Yeah, now those are great examples of using generative AI for those kinds of deepfakes. The use of AI in software development is, it's a boon and a real danger. So how do you find that balance? Because now, anybody in their mother's Nigerian basement can actually have a coding partner that is developing sophisticated code and malicious apps and attacks for their benefit.
So I serve on the Safety and Security Board Committee for OpenAI, and 2 years ago, my thought was all about this deepfake and emails, phishing and spam and those problems. But I've come around in the last 12 to 18 months to say the virtual hacker is actually going to be a more impactful and a more worrisome activity. Why do I say that? You mentioned how AI is writing software now. So the vibe coding ability to build software, one of the fundamental tenets of that is to build working software, have to know how to fix and avoid bugs. And bugs in software are the foundation of flaws and exploits. Those are the things that hackers turn into exploits in 0 days. And so now LLMs are getting very good at finding flaws in software. So they're going to be able to help us find at scope and scale flaws in that software. They're also getting really good at the process of hacking and red teaming. And there's any number of companies, and I'd be surprised if there weren't several in this room, who are working on technologies for the defensive side that go and penetration test networks and companies to find misconfigurations and flaws. Because like if you remember at the beginning, I said the way you defend a network is know your network. And so a really good best practice is to red team your company. And there's a company out there called HackerOne, and they run bug bounty programs. So companies sign up, and this company, HackerOne, crowdsources vetted hackers to go and penetration test your networks. And they've done this for a number of years. It's a great service. And one of the interesting things is they've gamified a bit, right? They've gone after the human nature, and they keep a leaderboard of who's finding the most bugs out there and out of the contracted crowdsourced group. And it turns out for the last several months, the #1 hacker at HackerOne is not a person anymore. It is an agentic AI called XBOW, XBOW. And it is finding more bugs and claiming more bounties than anybody else. And in fact, it's starting to outstrip the other leaders in the human space because it's relentless. It's looking for all of the details, right? It's rattling every doorknob to see what's open in your company. And it is just comprehensive. And if you're looking for more capacity, one person has to sleep and eat and take breaks, but this machine can come at you continuously, and when there's a new attack type known, it can apply that immediately and go look for all the unpatched, unsourced versions of that. So what we're seeing is this ability to bring artificial intelligence gives a scope and a scale that we've not seen in the human world to date. And so I think we're in for some hard times because the machines are going to find those misconfigurations, those passwords and tokens that are left inside unguarded places, and it's going to be pretty harsh.
Amid that bleak landscape, you probably have many people, I know, you have many people in government, in relevant agencies like your former agency, who are current on these challenges and how to address them. And you have many companies and people in the private software development community who are as well. And then you have many who aren't quite yet addressing the real nature of the revolution being drawn by use of AI in cyber. What do you recommend for those who are not yet really smelling the coffee?
Yeah, I think they do need to start getting onto the use of AI. So, people ask me, offense or defense which is more advantaged by AI? And my answer is it's neither, right? The people who use AI will outperform those who do not. That's the foundation for my beliefs is, if you're good at something and you figure out how to use AI properly, you're going to be 10x, 100x better at using it. And I think AI is also going to be this savior in the constant, relentless attacks that the offense will be able to bring, because you can get that same continuous stare for defense. And I would expect, those agentic red teamers to find flaws before the adversary bots find them. I would expect that, one of the important things is today, traditional antivirus and network endpoint defense tools that rely on signatures are going to be outdated because AI can write a new exploit that has a new signature for every single deployment, so they're unique. But what you can't do is change your behavior. There are flags about malicious behavior, and so if we get AI looking for, what does Lewis do on a normal day? He logs into these three services. He goes and stores his file in this one place, and he pulls information from this other. And you do that day in, day out. And then tomorrow, all of a sudden, your account is going to brand new servers and brand new places and moving data in unique ways. AI staring at this pattern can flag that immediately and take action. And so, the defenders need to get on board with both the LLM, but also traditional machine learning that's going to find these patterns and be able to help us defend at speed and scale as well.
Yeah, the speed and scale aspect, particularly on the part of nation-state actors, China. You talked about the Typhoon class of attacks against critical infrastructure and persistent use of agentic red teaming, iteratively learning and persistently watching and waiting. That strikes me as an extraordinary, obviously danger, but an opportunity to counter it with offensive asymmetric means. What would you think of that?
Yeah, I do think that, when you have an adversary, you can bring exquisite capabilities to help find and disrupt that. But we're not going to have one adversary. If you think about the Chinese, they have multiple entities across the PLA and their intel services. You've got multiple entities in Russia that all have hacking capabilities. But don't discount the challenge of the criminal element. And they are also going to be innovative in this space. They are going to adopt these techniques, and the people that won't do as well as the people that do. And so those groups that do adopt and advance and innovate are going to be the ones having success and having some of the biggest results, biggest impacts against us.
Yeah. If you were to lay a bet on which nation state would be able to develop and field the finest agentic cyber offensive force?
Clearly the Chinese, right? Well, the finest is going to be the U.S. Right?
There you go.
I have no
That's
doubt
what I was
about
hoping
that.
you would say.
We've developed the technology, we have all the innovation and the leaders, right? It's going to be the U.S. But the biggest adversary threat is China. If you look at what they're investing in the LLM space, the quantities of folks focused on cyber exploitation and the marriage of those two, they use their commercial industry, their defense industrial base extensively in the hacking environment, and that is also the entities that are innovating and spending money on agentic AI development in China.
I do encourage people to, when they generally read stock market news about, or hear about the performance of NVIDIA and its role in the context of Chinese news today about Huawei and their efforts to rival NVIDIA and Broadcom in chips, news on Intel, to trace that forward to its role in those exact kinds of state versus state, state versus criminal actor with access to these kinds of technologies. This was really eye-opening, Rob. I want to thank you for bringing to the audience some helpful and concerning information about the state of where we are on cyber offense and defense. Thank you very much.
Great to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Louis.
Let's thank Rob Joyce.
Thanks, Louis.
Thank you, absolutely. We are now welcoming to the stage, as previously introduced, Major General Keith Phillips. We're delighted to have him with us here today. Hello, General, have a seat.
Thank you very much.
Okay, served the nation for more than 30 years. So you've deserved to take a seat here. Thanks for joining this audience. We've got many uniformed people here in the audience as well, and probably a majority who have worked in one way with or for the department across a lot of different fields, including defense intelligence. So a very learned audience who like to be current on things. Let's talk a little bit about your observations on where you were most recently, shaking the dust off your boots a little bit, Ukraine. How would you lay down if you were staring, as I know you have been, if you're staring at a senior decision maker and asked, what's the laydown? What do you see on the conflict in Ukraine, and particularly for U.S. national interests?
Yeah, Louis, thank you very much for that, and thanks to everyone in the audience and the sponsors. These types of events, I think, are incredibly important. Growing up in the Army, it was combined arms. How do you get the infantry to work with artillery, to work with the armor? But I think with the environment that we're in now, this really has gone past combined arms, past joint, past whole of government, to really whole of nation and whole of like-minded nations. Before I kind of delve into that question, I do want to make clear that my comments today are my comments today, if you will, and don't necessarily represent the views of the department or the Army. But happy to share some reflections on my time in Ukraine. So if I could take a step back, I've served in uniform for a number of years. I'm a foreign area officer. I've had the opportunity and privilege to serve the nation in a number of different overseas assignments, mostly North Africa, Middle East, as well as Europe. The most recent one, as you alluded to, late December 2024 to July 2025, I was a senior defense official, the defense attaché in Ukraine. And in that capacity, as you wrap up every tour, you try and capture, what are the three kind of things that you want to flag for the commander, in this case, the incoming combatant commander of EUCOM. And never easy, a lot of information. How do you distill it down? I decided to use a framework, and maybe this will be useful, of the 3 Ds, if you will. Defense side of it, so obviously very broad, but more specifically in Ukraine, how are they addressing the defense of the homeland? How are they integrating air and missile defense? Those are issues that I think the new commander and the country are going to have to deal with now and going forward. Absolutely remarkable story, right? They had zero control of their airspace in 2022, essentially, and now, despite significant kinetic activity almost every single evening, it seems sad. Records are being broken every night. They're doing a pretty remarkable job, and it is cobbled together. In some ways, a lot of that is from U.S. assistance, 100%, but a lot of credit goes to the Ukrainians, whether it's the F-16 fighters up there trying to engage, whether it's their ability to take drone technology and get into interceptor drones. The second D was data, right? It's all about the data, right? How do you build those large language models? This is millions of hours of drone feeds, terabytes of data, tens of terabytes of data. How do the Ukrainians use that? How do they protect it? How do they exploit it? How can we learn from how they use it, how they exploit it, how they protect it? I will tell you, from some perspectives, you might look at it and say they are assuming a lot of risk. But they also don't have the luxury, I don't think, given just how pressing the threat is. And then the last D is the DIB, the Defense Industrial Base. Unfortunately for Ukraine, most of their heavy industry was in the east, right? So 2014 timeframe, the Donbass region, they had incrementally moved westward. And then you have 2022 invasion. So just now you see some of the Ukrainian ability to transport that capability in the human capital, in the machinery required. That's one element of it. The other element of course, is the backstopping or all the assistance that partners have given. First and foremost has to be the United States with what we've been able to help them with. So defense, data, and the defense industrial base. And I'll give it back to you here in a moment. But I've also had the opportunity to serve in other countries. So from 2014 to 2017, I served in Israel. That was a time frame, Operation Protective Edge. This was Gaza. This was the Hamas coming in through tunnels. Also the looming threat from Lebanon, the more strategic looming threat from Iran, and what Israel was able to do. This goes back the 70s and 80s. This is Scud missiles coming in. This is Iron Dome. This is David Sling. This is Arrow 2 and 3. So pretty remarkable from what they've been able to do. And then also, I think, an interesting case study to look at. And from 2019 to 2021, I was a senior defense official, DAT, in the UAE. Also a country, how do you protect the homeland? How do you leverage it? You don't necessarily have a defense industrial base, but you've got great partners and allies. In some cases, you reach out to whoever you need to reach out to. to get what you think you need. So you have a country that in 2006 was probably relying mostly on Hawk and legacy Soviet systems to a country now that I think actually had the first THAAD engagement of any meaningful extent. So I'll pause there. Didn't mean to ramble, but wanted to set
Not rambling at all. That's that laydown of the contextual landscape, and I'm really interested in the transition over time, over those last 15 years, 2 decades, the lessons straight up in the middle D on data, because that's been such an enormous revolution in the use of data. We started essentially in kind of lab purposes 25 years ago in intelligence, defense intelligence, CIA in support of mission activities. But those seem like, just targeted soda straw efforts. It grew rapidly with our own military involvement. Other nations learned from us. There was a kind of transnational education period of a couple of decades. But the role of data on your third D, on the defense industrial base writ large, has been extraordinary. And so, as you mentioned, in the UAE case especially, not really a local DIB, so to speak, relying on us and other allies and partners. Israel, big industrial base, but also had the United States at its side. So the trends in that data DIB interaction, see, where would you think that might be going, and how was that effective in Ukraine's case? Because it seems like they took where the rest of the world was and then turned it up to 11.
No, absolutely. And I think at some point in the not too distant future, we're going to be looking back with nostalgia at how simple things were today in this age. I think Rob's comments are absolutely germane. As you look at the Ukraine example in particular, they've used data, but I think they're really on the cusp of the AI element of it, the autonomous aspect of it. So, and that all the implications therein, command and control, ethical, what have you. But as you look back, you don't have to go back like 15 years necessarily. I guess in some ways we have the gaming industry to thank for it, right? And the compute power that all came together in a way. And then I think anything outside the national security realm was the societal realm. Society got better and faster, and industry helped drive that. So here we are today, and we're trying to look at this and determine, what is it going to mean, and that nexus between the data and the defense industrial base. I'll be the first one to tell you, I'm not an expert in either. I have some exposure to both, and I've, at every posting I've had, I've always enjoyed and learned a lot from industry partners as we've tried to work together. But at the end of the day, I think the data aspect of it and the DIB aspect of it is not necessarily something that's going to come from the government per se. Those days are kind of over. I think we're just going to have that in lockstep to the extent that we can. Us explaining the challenges, them explaining, you explaining the environment here and now, and just really be flexible enough and be willing to take the risk enough. And this is something else that I think you can weave between each of those different scenarios. Ukraine, obviously, existential threat, no doubt about it. Israel as well. And then even the UAE had this sense of, hey, geography matters, and we're really, really close to a formidable threat. I think as a result of that, they were able to take some more, and willing to take some more risk with AI, with data, with industry in a way that I think we need to probably continue to support, and also look at how we can keep a pace as a nation.
So let me ask a question about that, both the UAE and Ukraine. It's interesting, those DIB notions for each are, they're slightly unconventional. It's not like going to Israel and looking at what its intelligence and military industrial base is. What was the reporting like on that? I mean, for you, for the process of actually understanding, what is it just generically from a United States intelligence standpoint of being able to understand, okay, these are the players, it's marked by extraordinary fluidity and rapid change in who the providers are. Several thousand drone manufacturers have sprung up across Ukraine and outside in support. How is that as a challenge for our defense intelligence understanding of the nature of that conflict and our ally there?
I think in all those scenarios, actually, it's not as challenging as you might think, or you kind of framed it, because they're partnerships, and we have those relationships, and they understand, frankly, what we can bring and what we offer, and they're willing to help lay out and frame the problems they're facing and the solutions they're pursuing in just about every one of those cases. And I feel in each one of those cases in a very transparent manner and logical manner. So
I like that. That's good. And that says a lot about our ability, U.S. intelligence community's ability to rapidly adapt and understand shifts in rapidly changing environments. How does that translate to our understanding of what defense of the homeland might look like? There's reporting on the department has talked about the new NDS update a little bit. It's in draft. It's with the Secretary for review. Not to comment on it or the reporting about it, but just our ability to think about the nature of conflict and how we assess and anticipate what conflict might look like. What are some observations and lessons from especially your most recent time with Ukraine?
I think that's exactly right. And there are people who are studying all these things, but each one of those examples I think can inform and will inform where we go with Golden Dome and the investments. And that's why I think those three examples are pretty remarkable, because there's so much experience and so many lessons learned. Mm-hmm. If you look specifically at the Ukraine side of things, it really, to me, is sometimes overlooked, sometimes not. You even have the maritime element of it. Right? And maybe Israel has it a little bit, maybe UAE has it a little bit, but if you look at the United States, the homeland is no longer a sanctuary. We certainly can't assume it's a sanctuary, so then you got to look at the various threat vectors and where it might come from. I think the approach is a good one and a solid one. We have to figure out a way to have that layered defense. We have to make sure, it seems strange right now talking from our side, hey, what's our asset list, right? Or what are the most critical things that we need to protect? But those are conversations we need to have, and we have to kind of work with what we have, and we have a lot to make sure we've identified those and protect those in a way that provides us that integrated missile defense of the homeland to an extent we haven't really had to pursue in the past.
So particularly on that third D you talked about, the DIB aspect for in serial form, Israel, UAE, and Ukraine. What would you say are some lessons? You've got maybe 70% of the audience here is our defense industrial base and intelligence base. What would some lessons that you would want them to learn from your observations in those theaters?
Yeah, thanks for that. First, I'd like to appreciate in all three of those locations, there is, U.S. industry is there trying to help, trying to identify what is kind of beneficial for them, obviously, but solving problems ultimately, which is incredibly important. I guess in some ways, I would say don't give up, keep it up, if you will. It's not always easy, especially for some of the smaller and medium-sized companies out there, which are incredibly important because of some of the agility that they have that maybe others don't necessarily, not trying to offend anyone. But I think it's important. I think engaging with the combatant commands the way you do is really important, so we help stay aligned. I think working with the State Department and really engaging with the embassy the way most of you do is incredibly important, because that can actually in some ways, I think, be as much of an efficiency mechanism. Like, hey, these are some of the players in the Ministry of Defense. Here's some of the issues that they're struggling with. This is what we hear from them. Of course, the embassy is going to give you, every company, kind of the same perspective, but it's an informed perspective in a way that I think can help. And then always, listening is always important. But again, I think being aggressive, being persistent is important, both for the partners we talked about and also for the U.S. DIB.
Were there ever any instances where Ukrainian military or intelligence personnel indicated to you, boy, here's something that I really, whether it was them thinking about their own national Ukrainian industry suppliers and supporters, or international partners, something, they're kind of critical gaps that they indicated, wow, I wish we had something that would do this.
Yeah, certainly. And I think it goes, the phases of the war, and as time has gone on, those have changed a bit. Munitions, always a big thing. Sometimes it's just, your 155 munition, the consumption rate, and that's something too, I think we got to think this through. The burn rate and the magazine depth are incredibly important and on scales that we haven't seen.
Really under-anticipated. Yeah.
Under-anticipated, exactly right. And really, I think part of the reason the Ukrainians got so good at the drones were twofold. One, they didn't have the manning, and two, they didn't have the munitions.
Yeah.
But so at a certain point, now the Ukrainians like, hey, we have to be able to fill that gap. I think where we've landed right now is some of those niche capabilities, those critical munitions requirements that only the United States and key allies can produce at this point, and the limitations on the quantity that can be produced.
Yeah. That is something that their international partners in Europe and the U.S. really are uniquely positioned to be able to do with them.
And it's a big concern from them. Now, I will tell you, they have the human capital. They have, they're building the technical know-how. They are working on those solutions independent of everything we're trying to support them with in the conversations they have with us. So my guess is they will be able to solve a lot of their own problems sooner than we may anticipate. Yeah. And obviously in the drone, you mentioned hundreds, if not more, drone companies. They're not really interested too much in European drones, for instance. They will ultimately look to export wherever that number is. Now, it's not sustainable. It won't be 1,000 drone companies, but however they end up, whatever that landscape ends up, they're going to want to export those.
Yeah. I'm curious, you mentioned about briefing the incoming combatant commander at UCOM. This has been the last half decade has been one in which we've dramatically shifted from focus on the CENTCOM AOR to UCOM necessarily in this case, and also Indo-PACOM, and now again adding the homeland and North America as a real central focus. That kind of fluidity in the intelligence enterprise in support of military operations just on behalf of U.S. forces. It's really interesting to look and reflect on that. That's quite the period of fluidity and forced change. Any thoughts on that and reflection as you've spent 3 decades moving internationally there?
I think what you described is 100% accurate. I would also contend that essentially has been the environment for the last 25 or 30, whatever it is, and you know probably better than I do just how dynamic the environment is and how agile the workforce is, all the IC elements. It's not always ideal, but I think they also understand, and that my time as the director for operations at DIA helped really. At one point they said, all right, stop having fun in the field, Phillips. You've got to earn your pay. And I went a little bit kicking and screaming, but my 2.5 years in the building and getting to know the broader enterprise, it was more through kind of the human CI lens. But I was flabbergasted by the quality of the workforce, the dedication of the workforce, and then their ability to do just this. Okay, what's the most important thing for the nation today? Got it. We're going to work on that most important thing today.
It is an extraordinary enterprise. And again, it's represented in this audience today, and I want to thank all of them for coming to this two-day conversation. And the opportunity to kick it off with you, let me ask you for any final thoughts on particularly that interplay of data and the industrial base supporting defense. I love that construct of the 3 Ds. If you were the young Keith Phillips and you were starting out private sector or military, where would you place your focus? Would you go hardcore into today's AI and trying to deep dive into that one admittedly leading vector of technology? Or would you err on the side of being a generalist to support the kind of FAO background you've had? How does a young professional think about what will pay off for them over their future 30-year career?
It's a great question, Louis, and one I'm wholly unprepared to answer, but I like it because—
I don't believe that, so.
Yeah, I think you have to have a certain fluency, right? You have to have a technical, call it AI today, whatever it's going to be, you have to have that fluency. I think on a positive note, a lot of the young generation comes in with a degree of fluency in that regard. And I think that needs to be, frankly, a baseline of some description. You need to have some officers that can go deep, deep in that. I think it's going to permeate, but at the same time, if you look at the warfighting functions, those aren't going to change. If you look at the principle of the defense, those aren't going to change. The principle of the offense, I'm kind of a big principles guy, but you know, security, speed, mass, all those things are timeless in some ways, but the environment and the capabilities and the technology and the innovation change at a speed and a rapidity that is really uncomfortable for people like me at times. But I think the younger generation get it.
I think they do, and I know that the people, as we were talking earlier, that the people you encountered over the last couple of years in Ukraine certainly exemplify that. And we wish them phenomenal success. General, thank you so much for making this a stop here. Welcome back home, and appreciate all your service. Thanks very much. Join me in thanking General Keith Phillips.
Thanks.
That was fantastic. That was fantastic. Photo here. Let's do a little photo here. Pause for photo. The photographer told me everybody has a good side and a better side, and I think he was trying to warn me of something about that. Thank you so much, General.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you, General Phillips, and thank you, Rob, for being here with us today to kick off the summit. Please join me in again for a round of applause. So now it's time for lunch and some networking. Our first set of breakouts will begin promptly at 1:30. We have 2 different breakouts as well as lightning rounds. In the interim, enjoy your lunch as well as the exhibit hall, and we'll reconvene here at 3 o'clock. Thanks again.